Chapter 84, Godlike Brush. Ling Tian then walked forward to the painting and bent down to look at the uncompleted painting. With a sigh, he said, "For all of the external painting skills, Miss has already perfected them. There is no need for any improvement." External painting skills? The lady's expression changed as she stood up. "Don't tell me there is still internal painting skills? I hope that young noble will teach me a thing or two." The beautiful lady by her side also looked at Ling Tian unblinkingly with a myriad of expression in her eyes. "It is finally time for me to plagiarize something, swindle someone. It has been 15 years already, it really wasn't easy." Ling Tian became excited in his heart. However, he was calm on the surface as he said, "Painting skills are like mountains, painting intent is like the ocean. The mountain can be climbed and the ocean is limitless. Mrs. Painting skills are already high up on the mountain. But for painting intent..." Ling Tian laughed softly. The lady's eyes gleamed for a moment, obviously extremely excited, as her tone also became more courteous. "I hope young noble will guide me out of this maze." She had never heard about painting intent before. Now that she heard this young man mention it, it was obviously a completely different skill. This lady had already been studying painting for many years already. The moment she heard what Ling Tian said, it was as though she had arrived at a whole new world. However, the world in front of her was extremely hazy and she was unable to grasp it clearly. It seemed as though the haze could be easily broken with a single finger, but yet she lacked the strength of that finger. Ling Tian then lifted up his hands and said, "Miss, please watch." The lady's gaze was directed to where Ling Tian was pointing at, only to see the branches swaying gently in the air and ripples over the surface of the water. However, she felt that it was no different from what she saw previously. Looking at her face full of doubt, Ling Tian could not help but laugh. "Miss, please take a look at your drawing again and see if there are any differences between what you just saw." That lady did not look down at her painting. Instead, she looked towards Ling Tian and said, "That's right, while my painting is similar to the scene in front of me, they are actually miles apart." Ling Tian then chuckled, "This is where the problem lies." As he said that, he took the brush in her hands and the lady also moved away from the painting. Ling Tian then stood up straight with an arm behind his back and the other arm holding the brush. He then bent his body forward slightly. His brushes were as swift as a gust of wind. In an instant, the swaying branches were already on the paper. When he lifted up the brush, the fishes in the painting also looked extremely energetic, as though they would jump out from the painting at any time. In a single instant, this ordinary painting was given a soul and became much more lively. The four people stood by the side and watched with their eyes opened wide. However, they were not able to spot anything special that Ling Tian did. They felt that the only difference was the quicker speed. But, why was there such a large difference in the end product? Ling Tian then placed the brush on the inkstone and smiled, "I've made a fool out of myself." The four of them were filled with shock. They looked at Ling Tian as though they were staring at a monster. The eyes of the two ladies were filled with an intense admiration and worship. As for the two older ladies, their eyes were filled with respect. In just a few brushes, he was able to transform an ordinary item to a precious jewel. There was actually someone like him in the world. Why hadn't they heard about such earth-shattering painting skills before? Someone who had such painting skills should be world-renowned. Why was it that they had never heard about this youth in front of them? The girl who was painting then took a bow as she said with admiration, "Young noble is extremely talented and this little girl admires you completely. In just a few brushes, it looked as though you breathed life into this painting. This little girl has viewed countless of paintings but I have never seen skills as exquisite as yours. I am amazed. I wonder if young noble can..." As she said that, her eyes became dull. Obviously, she thought that Ling Tian was a prince. How was it possible for Ling Tian to become her teacher with such a status? Thus, she swallowed the words about wanting to learn from him. Ling Tian naturally understood her intentions. However, his expression did not change as he pointed to the drawing and said, "If Miss does not find me irritating, I will give an explanation." The eyes of both ladies lit up in surprise. Ling Tian then pointed and said, "Look at this place, the willow trees are swaying in the wind and water rippling. The reason why this scene is so intoxicating is without a doubt due to the wind gently caressing them. Just like the saying, the willow branch faces the west while the willow leaves faces the east, this is not a drawing of the willow but of the wind. As long as you are painting things like willow, clouds or water ripples, the main focus of the painting should be the wind. The willow branch faces the west while the willow leaves faces the east, this is not a drawing of the willow but of the wind." The lady who was painting mumbled as though she came to a sudden realization, as her eyes lit up in excitement. She felt as though every single word that came out from Ling Tian's mouth was different from the secular world, capable of amazing her with shock. She could not help but think, if this person can become my master, it would be the greatest fortune of my life. It is a pity that he is a prince. It seems that this idea of mine can only be buried in my heart. Ling Tian then pointed at the fake landscape and continued, "Just as the saying goes, you do not need to be afraid of simplicity when splashing ink, cannot loathe complications with brush techniques. This is why." The lady who was painting could not help but ask, "Can I ask young noble, what is splashing ink? What are brush techniques?" Ling Tian was taken aback for a moment. He then realized that he had gotten too carried away, forgetting that there was no difference between the different brush techniques in this generation. Helpless, he could only say, "A knowledgeable person speaks less, a skilled person uses less strokes. The intent should first fill your brush, with your intent painting the picture before your brush arrives. This is known as your brush lacking but your intent sufficient. Before you start painting, it is best for you not to rush. Before you use ink, the painting should already be in your mind. You will then be able to paint beautifully." Realizing that he was unable to explain, he could only steer the conversation in another direction, diverting her attention elsewhere. With worship in her face, she praised, "Young noble's words really reveals the true essence of painting with a single phrase. Your words are extremely thought-provoking and is like a loud bell, ringing in my head. To being ... To this little girl, it is like sacred anointing. You widened the horizons of this little girl and I have received much from it. Please accept a bow." As she said that, she took a deep bow. However, Ling Tian noticed that when she was talking, she stuttered for a moment, "To being ... To this little girl, this phrase has a big problem. The being word which didn't fully exit from her mouth would probably be her real name." Ling Tian then laughed, "Miss, you do not need to be so polite. I was only speaking from a moment of inspiration. It is rare to see a lady love painting as such, so I could not help but say a few more words. I hope that you will not blame me." The lady smiled and said, "Young noble is too humble. This little girl is only filled with admiration and gratitude towards young noble." Chapter 85, Teary Dreams of Worldly Affairs. Ling Tian laughed heartily and said, "Miss is too polite." The lady in question quietly observed the painting which Ling Tian perfected. The more she looked at it, the more her love for it, as well as her admiration for Ling Tian grew. She could not help but say, "Since young noble has already finished the painting, why not you proceed with the last step, and make this art piece a priceless family heirloom?" Ling Tian stared blankly for a while, before saying, "I would require your pointers for this." The girl in question pursed up her lips into a smile. Although she only possessed mediocre looks, it seemed as though the myriad stars were coming out from those intelligent eyes of hers that sparkled. Looking at this pair of dreamy impeccable eyes, real yet ethereal at the same time, Ling Tian could not help but feel shocked in his heart. He then heard a gentle and sweet voice meekly saying, "Why not young noble add on a poem, to have both poetry and art reflect each other? Only then would the beauty of this painting fully manifest." This will also allow this little girl to admire your talents once again." Ling Tian laughed heartily before saying, "This one here is of humble talent and shallow learning. I would be embarrassing myself if I tried to produce a poem. As for my talents, that would be even lesser to speak of. If I do this rashly, and end up profaning this Miss's eyes, then that would be a crime. Please do not put me in a spot, Miss." The eyes of the female in question flickered as though pondering, and she gave a light laugh. This little girl's request was too presumptuous in the first place. "Since I would be leaving this place soon, I wouldn't know if there would be a chance for me to meet you again. If young noble were to be stingy over a few drops of ink, then won't it be a lifetime of regret for me if we do not meet again in the future?" The tone was gentle, yet the content was ruthless and forceful. Though this sentence had a hidden meaning, it was not difficult to unravel. "Leaving this place soon as well as wouldn't know if there would be a chance for me to meet you again" signified that she would not be staying for an extended period of time. "Stingy over a few drops of ink as well as won't it be a lifetime of regret" would mean that she was filled with admiration for this young noble who was outstanding in the arts. Finally, her sentence "if we do not meet again in the future" hinted at a faint taste of a young girl in love, as well as a heavy feeling of helplessness. In this entire exchange, there was an indistinct indication of the lady trying to test him, yet filled with contradiction in her request. As such, Ling Tian could be sure that today's performance allowed the tightly shut heart of the girl to crack open a little, enough to leave his image branded onto her heart. Right now, the artist girl herself had conflicting views innately. Part of her hoped that Ling Tian would live up to her expectations and perform a poem for her to keep as a memento. However, she also secretly hoped that Ling Tian would be just as he said, of shallow learning and only well-versed in the arts. If that's the case, she could naturally erase the shock he had given her today and wipe him off from her heart. This also signified the contradiction of a young girl's blossoming feelings, where she was attempting to find someone whom she could relate to, but was unwilling to be reduced to a prisoner of love. Thus, she intentionally tried to make things difficult for Ling Tian. If he made a fool out of himself, then her impression of him would as a result plummet straight to rock bottom. As such, even if they to meet again in the future, she would only treat him as an outstanding artist, a slightly different brother from another nobility. The lingering sentiment in her heart would also disappear without a trace, without any further pining. Ling Tian smirked to himself, "Since I've already seen through your plan, then how could I let you escape from the grasp of my hand? Might as well. I'll add on more colors to whatever image you already have of me." Giving a smile as though he was unruffled, Ling Tian said unhurriedly, "A person does not know where he will go in his life, akin to the geese leaving footprints in the snow. While the snow contains the prints, it does not count for whatever the geese have flown. Life itself is erratic, we congregate and separate based on fate. Just like how the clouds gather and unfurl, everything is essentially the same. It's alright, since this lady has spoken as such, then if this one were to reject you, it will not give a good impression of myself. If that's the case, then even though it will be difficult for me, but this one shall give it a try and make a fool of myself. I hope that this young lady not to laugh at my mediocre calligraphy and crude words." The eyes of the artist seemed to go slight blurry and fuzzy at this moment, her lips trembling slightly as they opened and closed slightly, repeating the poem that Ling Tian recited previously, "A person does not know where he will go in his life, akin to the geese leaving footprints in the snow. While the snow contains the prints, it does not count for whatever the geese have flown. Life itself is erratic, we congregate and separate based on fate. Just like how the clouds gather and unfurl, everything is essentially the same. Everything is essentially the same." Her lips began trembling, her eyes seeming to have lost all spirit. Staring at Ling Tian, who seemed unaffected by any and all mortal affairs, she felt as though there were huge waves generated deep in her heart. She took there blankly in a daze, to the point that she did not even catch the next few words which Ling Tian had spoken. The other young lady by her side nudged her gently, breaking the artist out of her reverie, and she could not help but blush. Even the cosmetics on her face could not fully hide the blush, as it spread even to her fair neck. She could only gently whisper, "This little girl forgot herself a moment ago, please don't take any offense for this, young noble." Ling Tian understood clearly what happened in his heart, and lightly smiled, waving off her apology, "No worries." The girl continued in that soft voice, almost like a whisper, "May I know if the great work that young noble has been mulling over is completed yet? This little girl is eagerly waiting to read it." As she finished speaking, she blushed once again. The tone of her sentence actually carried a bit of coyness, with a few degree of impishness and some bashfulness. Lightly tiptoeing, she felt as though her whole body could simultaneously combust from the heat she released in her embarrassment. Behind her, the two middle-aged women could not help but stop in shock. This was their first time seeing the little princess act like this from birth till now. They could not help but stare at each other with heavy expressions. They then directed their gazes towards the girl in question, their eyes filled with worry and panic. Ling Tian purposefully lingered his gaze on the artist's body a tad longer than usual, before turning around as he spoke, "I've troubled this young lady to already wait for so long a time, how could I dare to be neglectful?" Even though his gaze was only a touch longer than normal, but how could that sensitive young girl not feel it? She could not help but tremble a little in response. The corners of Ling Tian's mouth curled up, revealing a faintly discernible smiling expression. He raised up the brush and dipped it slightly in the ink. Steadying his breath, his brush suddenly flew out, the soft tip of the brush as though swimming on the pristine white paper, seeming like a dragon soaring through the vast heavens, then like a crane dancing on an immortal mountain. Using his one hand, a semi-cursive calligraphy, like the fleeting clouds and flowing water, as though crafted by the heavens themselves, appeared beside the willows dancing in the wind. As though a refreshing breeze had sprung forth, with the bright moon overhead, a poem appeared on the paper without a single trace. The strokes were vigorous yet ephemeral, bold and imposing, elegant and refined. Just these few words lent an air of mystery to the entire picture, as though one was looking at a boundless horizon. A tree up high, crowned in jade. Myriads of twigs, drooping like silk. By whose design, your leaves so fine? Vernal February winds, like a scissors blade. When it came to the inscription of his name, Ling Tian thought for a while, but did not leave his name. Instead, he wrote down the 4 words "Teary dreams of worldly affairs" on it. He thought to himself, "Since you have misgivings and want to draw the line clearly, then I'll give you a dose of your own medicine. One must know that in order to truly appreciate what is good in this world, then one has to grasp the opportunity that is presented to them at the first opportunity. In the mortal world, once an opportunity is lost, one undoubtedly cannot turn back their head to request for it again. At that time, even if you are exceptionally talented under heaven, or an illustrious character with unlimited wealth, what would await you would still be the teary dreams of worldly affairs." At the same time, Ling Tian innately celebrated the fact that he was a fan of Tang poetry in his previous life, and had something of actual use, else he would have definitely made a fool out of himself today. Putting down the brush by the side in a very graceful manner, Ling Tian did not even take a second glance at his poetry, his face retaining his natural and unrestrained flair. It was as though what he just wrote as of no big deal, nothing worth talking about. As for his act of plagiarism, Ling Tian did not feel that it was inappropriate, and even more unlikely to feel embarrassed. His line of thinking was, since this world does not have such things, then let me fill up that blank. 5,000 years of culture in China, let it also shine here in this world. Even if this world does not have the beautiful mountains and rivers that stretched for over 80,000 miles. Chapter 86, Confidence. Good poem. Good words. The 4 ladies praise together. They all then read the poem silently, imagining the beauty of the description within the poem. It was like the hibiscus out of fresh water, a naturally formed art of the world. It reached perfection and was beautifully crafted. However, that lady looked towards how Ling Tian engraved his name, and a tinge of disappointment could be seen in her eyes. She could not help but ask, "Can I ask, young noble, what these words 'deary dreams of worldly affairs' means?" What she meant was, "Why don't you write your real name but leave behind a weird line of words?" Ling Tian laughed involuntarily as he said, "Because Qing stole the elixir, she became lonely every night. I feel that there is only one chance for the most beautiful thing in life. If it is missed, then one can only be like Qing, dreaming about worldly affairs with tears." Furthermore, Ling Tian looked towards the lady with a smile. "Isn't the name which I left behind what Miss wanted to see?" The story of Qing sprinting to the moon was also widely spread in this world, and this lady would definitely know about it. She thought about the loneliness which Qing suffered for the thousands of years, living in regret as she looked down at the mortal world. She then thought about what Ling Tian said, "I feel that there is only one chance for the most beautiful thing in life. If it is missed, then one can only be like Qing, dreaming about worldly affairs with tears." Her heart could not help but tremble. "Don't tell me I will become like Qing in the moon? No. Because Qing stole the elixir, she became lonely every night. I don't want to be lonely every night. I don't want to dream about worldly affairs with tears." Her body swayed like the weak willow's branch in the winds as tears filled her eyes as she thought about Ling Tian saying, "Isn't the name I left behind what Ms. wanted to see?" Her heart wrenched in pain. Ling Tian knew that he said enough. If he were to carry on, the words may have an opposite effect. Looking at the lady's teary eyes and pitiful expression, Ling Tian felt heartache in his heart as he thought, "I'm sorry. I actually really like you. I liked you ever since I first saw you. Although I am not able to see your true appearance, I cannot lie to myself about such a feeling. But while I feel something for you, you may not feel anything for me. To ensure that we will not have any regrets, and for the big plan in my heart, I hope you will forgive me for using such a scheme against you. Forgive me for purposefully harming you. I will definitely make it up to you in future." All of a sudden, everyone was silent. Then, laughter filled the place from afar, making this place feel even more desolate. Ling Tian then gave a cough as he looked up to the sky and said, "I have disturbed you for a long time and it is getting late. I will be taking my leave." He then thought to himself, "I have already sowed the seeds. I just have to wait for her to come and find me. With her intelligence, she will definitely be able to find my real identity." That lady never expected that this young noble couldn't even be bothered to ask about her name and status before leaving. While it was true that her appearance wasn't real, Sister Wei who was beside her was a real beauty. It seems that this young noble is really a gentleman. Thinking about this, she could not help but feel more admiration towards Ling Tian's character. She then said reluctantly, "Is young noble going to leave so soon?" Ling Tian took 2 steps forward and stopped. Thinking about how this lass loved painting so much, he gave a sigh and added on, "This conversation today made my mood really great. After the parting today, I believe it will be difficult for us to meet again. As people who love painting, I suddenly thought of a story which may be helpful to you. I came and go in a hurry and do not have anything on me. Before I leave, let this story be a gift for you." That lady was elated as she bowed, "Thank you, young noble. This little girl is all ears." She could not help but walk closer to Ling Tian. Ling Tian then adjusted his thoughts as he said calmly, "There was a very famous painter called Wen Tong who was an expert in drawing bamboos. To draw bamboos, regardless of seasons or weather, he would always roam around in the bamboo forest to notice the subtle changes in the bamboo. At times, he would use his finger to measure how long each segment on the bamboo was. At times, he would record how dense the veins on a bamboo leaves were. There was once where the strong winds began to brew and lightning flashed in the sky. Thunderstorm was obviously approaching and everyone began to run home. But just at this moment, Wen Tong, who was at home, hurriedly grabbed his straw hat and sprinted towards the bamboo forest on the mountain. Just when he exited from his house, the rain began to pour. Wen Tong was only interested to look at how the bamboo looked like in a thunderstorm and could not be bothered with the slippery ground. He lifted up the lapel of his robe and began to climb up the mountain towards the bamboo forest. By the time he arrived at the bamboo forest, he was already panting heavily. Not bothering about the water splashing at his face, he began to observe the bamboos unblinkingly. He then looked at how the bamboos bent in the rain and wind, swaying all around. Following which, he began to carefully remember how the bamboos looked in the rain and wind. Because of how he observed the actions of the bamboo for long periods of time, he was extremely clear of how the bamboo would change in all seasons. In the rain or snow, what the bamboo color was and how their postures would be. Under the intense sunlight of summer, how were the bamboos different? How are the different types of bamboos different from each other? He was extremely clear about all of that. Thus, when he drew bamboos, he does not even need to make a sketch. Then, people began to praise him, saying, when Wen Tong draws bamboos, his mind is already filled with bamboos. As he finished his story, Ling Tian clasped his hands and said, I will take my leave. He hardened his heart, ignoring the look of the lady who wanted to keep him back. His footsteps then sped up as he walked out. Suddenly, he felt something. He had been wrapped by a large pressure. Ling Tian was shocked in his heart, but his face was still calm as he stopped walking. This person obviously only wanted to test him. He only unleashed pressure, but there was no killing intent. No wonder I felt that there was something wrong previously. It turns out there was a super expert hiding behind this little princess's back. Thinking about this, it made more sense to him. While the two ladies were skilled in martial arts, they were only average at best. How was it possible for the Yu family to let their little princess out like that? It would only make sense for there to be a hidden expert protecting her. The smile on Ling Tian's face was still calm as he acted as though he did not notice this mysterious expert. His footsteps then continued towards the exit of the courtyard, walking at a pace which was neither fast or slow. The spiritual sense then lingered on his body for a moment before being retracted. It was as though he didn't find anything to be strange. A high-pitched laughter then sounded from ahead. Following this high-pitched laughter, a lovable voice sounded, Elder Sister Wei, are you guys still painting? Following the voice, a young lady with a bunch of flowers in her hands bounced in front of Ling Tian. Ling Tian could not help but be elated in his heart. The heavens are really on my side. A free messenger actually appeared. She is actually someone I know. This young lady was the daughter of Palace Hall General, Shen Ruer. The both of their families friends. However, Shen Ruer was not as happy as Ling Tian. As she saw this infamous licentious number 1 silk pants of the capital appear here without a trace, she only thought that he had ill intentions. Or perhaps, he had harassed a lady here. Now that she saw him walking out briskly with a look of success, she could not help but be shocked. The flowers in her hands dropped to the ground as she exclaimed, "What is a scum like you doing here?" Her voice was extremely high-pitched and filled with disbelief. Chapter 87, He is Ling Tian. As Shen Ruer saw that this silk pants, Ling Tian, was here, she determined that he must have done something bad. Together with the evil-looking smile on his face, she could not help but think to herself, don't tell me he is afraid of his dirty deeds to being exposed and wants to silence me? Thinking about this, her heart began to beat rapidly as she shouted out, "What is a scum like you doing here?" These words was not so much of a question but a reminder to her sisters that there was a baddie here, asking them to take precautions. Even if she were to be silenced here, Ling Tian would not be able to escape. It also had the intention of warning Ling Tian, "Someone definitely heard my cry, I'll see if you still dare to touch me." As the lady who was painting saw Ling Tian's figure leave, that dull and straight-back view had an inexpiable feeling of loneliness. It was as though the person who just left was a person suffering from 1,000 years of loneliness and desolation. Loneliness. This was what the lady felt from deep within her heart when she saw Ling Tian's back view. Cold and aloof, independent from the world. Don't tell me this elegant and poised young man has such deep and heavy emotions? Then, the story which Ling Tian told her was seemingly recited in her ears again as she lowered her head in consideration, feeling the remnant fragrance in her lips. She could not help but fall into a daze as she stared at Ling Tian's leaving back view. She did not even hear what the lady by her side was saying. Right at this moment, a scream sounded. As she took a look, she saw a lady appearing in front of Ling Tian as a scream of rage and fear followed. "What is a scum like you doing here?" Her heart could not help but shake. Scum? Him a scum? Thinking about this, she could not help but shake her head in self-mockery. How can an elegant person like him be a scum? Ling Tian then bent down and picked up the flowers on the floor. Handing it over to the lady, he said something before leaving from their sights. From the start to the end, he did not turn his head back even once. It was as though the things which happened today was just like a passing cloud, not leaving a single trace within her heart. The lady who screamed seemed to have been scared silly, standing on the spot in a daze. Wei Zhuan, who was by the side, stared at the back view of Ling Tian as she sighed. This person is really an amazing man. The girl who was painting turned around to look at Wei Zhuan with a complicated expression. Right at this moment, Shen Ruer, who was in the daze, seemed to have snapped out of it. After throwing the flowers on the floor, she sprinted towards Wei Zhuan with a frightened expression. "Sister Wei, where are you? Are you fine?" Worry filled her voice. As Wei Zhuan saw how she was, she could not help but laugh. "This Ruer is always so hasty." She then shouted out, "I'm here." Right after she shouted, Wei Zhuan had already appeared in front of them with a pair of frightened-looking eyes. She grabbed Wei Zhuan's arms and carefully looked at her all over. Seeing how Wei Zhuan's dressing was still neat with a calm face, she let out a heave of relief. Following which, she began to grow anxious again. "Don't tell me that scum didn't come here? He went to find the other sisters?" In anxiousness, she wanted to go to another courtyard. Wei Zhuan then held her hands and asked, "Sister Ruer, what's wrong with you? What's going on?" At this moment, all the ladies in the courtyard had heard the cry of Shen Ruer. Not knowing what was going on, they all came over to take a look. Princess Jiayu was also included. She had been extremely nervous. The palace maids reported that they had brought Ling Tian to the back courtyard of the Eternal Music Palace, making Princess Jiayu extremely nervous as she did not know what this little devil will do. She was also afraid for her sisters. If that fellow has a sudden outburst of lust and do something out of line in the back courtyard, it would be too late for regret. But all the different young nobles tangled with her, not letting her go because of their admiration for her beauty. As such, Princess Jiayu could only be worried but could do nothing about it. After finally finding an excuse to escape, she quickly sprinted to the back courtyard. However, she never expected to hear a frightened scream the moment she entered. She had recognized that it was the voice of Shen Ruer, making her innards tangled up from fear. She could not help but curse Ling Tian in his heart for being so lecherous, actually harassing the daughter of the palace hall general. If things were to go wrong, it would be a mess difficult to take care of. In anxiousness, she sprinted towards the direction of the scream as she bitterly lamented in her heart with regret, "I should not have let him in." As Shen Ruer saw her sisters all arrive without a single one missing, she heaved a sigh of relief again. She then patted her chest as she said while panting, "Thank goodness, thank goodness. I was frightened to death just now." All the ladies began to ask her what was going on, extremely puzzled by Shen Ruer's actions. As Shen Ruer was still catching her breath, she stuck out her tongue and replied with a smile, "I saw that scum, Ling Tian, leaving here hastily just now. I thought that he had done something bad and got a bad fright. Seeing that all of you are all right, I am relieved." All of the ladies let out a cry of shock as they exclaimed, "Ling Tian? What's he doing here?" Shenruer grunted and she replied, "That fellow had always been lawless. Is there a place where he doesn't dare to go?" Everyone all revealed faces of fear. Of these ladies present, there were many where the Ling family had made a marriage proposal before. But even if their elders wanted to accept the marriage, they were all rejected by these ladies who heard about Ling Tian's infamous name. Now that they heard that Ling Tian had came here, they felt a chill run down their spine as they thought to themselves, "Thankfully he did not see me. If I let him find me, that would be trouble." General Ling had made such great contributions to the empire. If he were to request the emperor to appoint a marriage, the emperor would definitely agree. If my life is handed into this playboy, I would definitely be ruined. They then began to ask, where did he walk out from? They all began to look at each other, seeing which sister was the unfortunate one who suffered from that scum. Shenruer then pointed at Wei Zhuan. "He walked out from Sister Wei's place and bumped into me. He even made me drop my flowers from the fright." "Eh? Where are my flowers?" All the ladies then let out a sigh, looking at Wei Zhuan with regret and pity. It was as though this sister of theirs had already fell into the wolf's nest. "You're talking about that white-dressed teen?" A voice full of shock sounded. It was the lady who was painting. She had already walked into the center of the crowd, asking Shenruer that question. Shenruer replied, "Yes." "You saw him and threw your flowers away?" the lady who was painting asked in astonishment. "Yeah. He is the #1 silk pants in the sky-bearing empire? The infamous playboy?" Her volume did not grow softer but grew louder and louder. At the same time, the shock in her voice also grew stronger and stronger. Shenruer became a little frustrated. "This sister, what's the matter? He is the one, the scum who left from here was Ling Tian. Did he bully this sister?" As she said that, she looked towards the lady who was painting with a frown. Looking at her dark skin tone and scanning her body once, Shenruer replied with difficulty, "But rest assured sister, he probably won't bully you." Chapter 88, Raising the Silk Pants. As Shenruer said that, the four of them had a feeling of fainting. These 4 people would naturally be the lady who was painting, Wei Zhuan and the 2 female guards. As Princess Jiayu stood by the side, her countenance was extremely ugly. She was a cousin of Ling Tian and did not feel that this cousin of hers was that bad. She had only heard of his incorrigible acts from rumors. Now that she heard these ladies calling him a scum and bastard, she was uncomfortable in her heart. "No matter what, he is my own cousin. These bunch of lass, don't you know what it means to show me some face?" As the ladies saw that the 4 of them were about to faint, they could not help but be startled. They quickly supported the 4 of them as doubt filled their faces. "Don't tell me Ling Tian took advantage of all 4 of them in such a short while?" They could not help but look at the 4 of them as they shook their heads silently. Of the 4 of them, only Wei Zhuan was a beauty. As for the rest. If Ling Tian were to really do something like that, his taste really has a big problem. That white-dressed young man was Ling Tian? The infamous #1 silk pants in the sky-bearing empire? The moment they knew about this, Wei Zhuan, the lady who was painting and the 2 female guards did not know whether to laugh or cry. If such a person is a scum, silk pants and bastard, just what should be those so-called talents be called? Such a talented person with a scholarly poise and outstanding elegance. He was actually the #1 silk pants of the sky-bearing empire. Wei Zhuan's mouth was wide open in shock. While the lady who was painting had disguised her appearance, she did not. Not only did she not disguise herself, she had purposefully dressed herself up today. In front of such a beauty, that white-dressed man did not even take another look at her. Even if he did, his eyes were completely clear with his actions polite. A person like this was actually being called a scum? Then what should those so-called gentlemen, who would drool with their legs going jelly when they meet a beauty, be called? In that moment, the four ladies became confused. Especially the lady who was painting and her two guards, they were completely filled with amazement. Don't tell me the customs of the sky-bearing empire was this different? Only a real gentleman would be called a scum? While this was completely absurd, these three ladies thought that this was the only explanation for Ling Tian to be called a scum. As the four of them left their original positions, the painting attracted the attention of all the ladies. They all crowded forward and were in amazement as they saw it. Praises sounded endlessly. For these ladies to be called talented, they would naturally learn about zither, chess, painting, calligraphy, poetry and singing. Furthermore, they would be proficient with at least one or two of those skills. As the ladies saw this painting, they were all attracted to it. The realistic painting, together with the elegant brush strokes and graceful words, were all melded together perfectly. As the ladies saw the painting, they could not help but be drawn into it. The ladies here were all familiar with Wei Zhuan and knew that while she was good at painting, she would not be able to paint such a perfect picture. If that's the case, the painter would naturally be this ordinary-looking lady by her side. All of a sudden, all of their gazes were directed to her. That lady gave a bitter laughter and knew that they had a misunderstanding. Sisters, all of you have overestimated this younger sister. This painting is brought from my home. I originally wanted to paint today but suddenly saw that the scenery was extremely similar to this painting. Thus, I took it out to admire it. As she said halfway, she wanted to say Ling Tian's name but suddenly stopped. She then thought to herself, although Ling Tian is called a silk pants by everyone, he is actually so talented. Don't tell me he decided to conceal that on purpose? If that's really the case, will I end up affecting him if I expose him to the attention of all the ladies here? Being a smart lady, she decided to shut her mouth about the matter. It doesn't matter whether or not he was trying to feign his personality, this matter should not be revealed by her. She then made a decision in her heart. She originally thought that he must have been a prince to freely enter the palace of a princess. She never expected that she was wrong. After she thought about what Ling Tian said, "Isn't this what Miss wants?" She felt her heart ache as she lamented to herself, with his wisdom, how was it possible for him to not see through my intentions? For him to leave without asking for my name, he may have misunderstood my intentions. I better clear up this misunderstanding. Since you are not a prince, it wouldn't matter if I learned painting from you. After finding a legitimate reason to approach Ling Tian, she realized that she was unknowingly more cheerful. The depressed feeling which had accumulated in her heart had also disappeared. HMPH, not only will I want to learn painting from you, I want to see just how much you are hiding. Why are you doing so? No matter what, I will not believe that you are the person in the rumors. She then made a signal to Wei Zhuan and her two guards, telling them to not reveal the truth of the painting. While the three of them did not understand why she would do so, they nodded in response. She then heaved a sigh of relief. In that moment, she began to feel strange about her own actions. Just what is wrong with me? Why do I keep thinking about him? Why will my mood be affected by him? Don't tell me. She did not dare to continue thinking as she felt her cheeks beginning to burn. Then, one of the young lady present exclaimed, "This painting is really too beautiful. I have learned how to paint since I was young and felt that I have made small accomplishments in these few years. But the moment I saw this painting, I felt as though I had always been like a frog in the well. My lousy painting skills is just totally incomparable to this Mr. Tiri dreams with worldly affairs. If I am able to see him, I will definitely take him as my master." Her words were filled with longing. The other ladies then added on, "The drawing of this Mr. Tiri dreams with worldly affairs can be said to be the best in the world. I have never heard of anyone drawing something like this before." As the young lady listened to their discussions silently, she could not help but smile proudly. HMPH, I will not let you guys see him. If he does not reveal his secret, I will keep it in my heart forever. Thinking about this, she could not help but give a sweet smile. As this moment, the young lady who was looking at the painting began to recite Ling Tian's poem, a tree up high, crowned in jade, myriads of twigs, drooping like silk, by whose design, your leaves so fine? Vernal February winds, like a scissors blade. What a good poem, good words, good painting. Can I ask this younger sister, was this poem left behind by this Mr. Teary dreams of worldly affairs? Indeed. The young lady then sighed, this Mr. Teary dreams of worldly affairs is really extremely wise. I wonder where he is from, how old he is now. As she said that, she gently stroked the painting with a face full of admiration. In her heart, someone who would be able to do such a painting is definitely a master who had spent many years to study painting and must definitely be an old man. The young lady who was painting could not help but cover her mouth as she giggled. I also do not know. I have never seen before this amazing person. This painting was found by coincidence. She was resolute to not let these ladies find out that this painting is done by Ling Tian, who was silk pants to the extreme in their eyes. HMPH. Since all of you thinks that he is a silk pants, then let such an image continue in your heart. If I tell you this and all of you visit him every other day, together with the fact that all of you are in the same city, won't you have a larger advantage? She thought to herself with a smile on her face. But as she thought up till that point, she snapped out of her daydream, what am I thinking? Why would I think about that? My goodness. Don't tell me. With a sudden shout, the young lady looking at the painting looked at her hands with amazement. Why would the ink on this painting stick to my hands? All of the ladies then turned back to take a look at her hands. Indeed, her hands were filled with black ink.